Hello, podcast listener. This is your host with the most coming at you. I want to tell you about today's episode. It features Patrick Kirby. He's been on the show before, but this time we get to talk about all sorts of nerdy stuff like video games, D&D, what it was like to work in a video rental store. Plus, it would really help us out if you could listen to this episode, and you're going to love it, and then go and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, on Spotify, wherever you consume the podcast you love. Rate us up there as high as it can go. We sure would appreciate it. Now, let's get this episode rolling, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
I've always been a fan of the fact that nerd culture exploded and became part of the everyday culture. It became not only all right, but it actually became cool to be into nerd stuff. One of the greatest explanations of what nerd, geek, dweeb life is like is the show Freaks and Geeks. They did such a wonderful job taking what was nerdy in the 80s, and which was very influenced by what was nerdy in the late 70s, and make you feel the kind of the pain but the joy at the same time. So here's what I love the most about most nerdy people. They embrace the fact that they were, before it was cool, I should mention, they embrace the fact that, yep, I'm nerdy, but the nerds are loyal to other nerds. You never had trouble finding the people in town who wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. And it was just amazing when somebody bought the new Mortal Kombat and you could go and game with it. Or you showed up to a reading of a Philip K. Dick novel somewhere and there's 4 other people and you're like, well, we're all best friends now, I guess. That camaraderie, I think, is lost on the people who say, oh, well, I played sports, so you don't know what it's like to be part of a team. Right. I think that they know exactly what it was like to be part of a team. In fact, not only did they know what it was like to be part of a team, they knew what it was like to battle a dragon. All you did was go to state.
Right. You and I come from a generation for sure. And I think I think it kind of, calling people nerds and geeks, I don't think really started to happen until the mid 20th century, where there was this delineation between are you popular and athletic, or are you unpopular and into intellectual stuff? And when you and I were kids, calling someone a nerd or a geek or being known as that, it was a pejorative. It was supposed to be a negative thing. I was massively into comic books. You loved wearing sweatpants. We were we were definitely nerds and geeks. But now, even though I don't have my ear to the ground of what the hip cool kids are saying these days, it seems that the culture has embraced geekery and nerddom in a way that it never has before. So I wonder if we were to go back, if we were to go now and look at kids who were our age then, if they're dealing with the same cliques, if they're dealing with the same kind of antagonism, I don't know. But the nerds have certainly inherited the earth, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that today's cliques are just different, where you can find somebody who plays video games and couldn't wait for the latest update to the Nintendo Switch, but also happens to be on the football team. Right. I think the cliques have changed to things like, oh, this person, happens to like this other part of culture. So maybe they're a foodie, or maybe they're just more in tune with their feelings than somebody else. And I think that's kind of how kids today, being that I watch them when I'm at North High coaching their improv team, I get a chance to kind of take this glimpse into it. And I will say this, kids today are so much more in tune with who they are and what they want to be, and embracing that and celebrating it amongst each other. I think that the future generation has a lot of great things. Now, that being said, they still need to learn how to change a tire on a car, because sometimes you are outside of cell phone service and you won't be able to watch a YouTube video. Today's guest is Patrick Kirby. You can listen to another episode featuring Patrick Kirby right after you finish this one. Episode 140, Fundraise Awesomer, is on the JJ Meets World website or wherever you consume the podcasts you love. We talked on his first episode about his work with nonprofits and getting them to completely throw away their old playbook and start something brand new to engage their communities. But this time, we talk about nerdy stuff. We talk about the fact that really, not even deep down, on the surface, Patrick is just a giant geek, and the kind of giant geek that you think like, yep, this guy is a great ambassador for the rest of us out there to just be out there loud and proud with our love of video games and comic books and all sorts of nerdy stuff. Our conversation includes things like video store rentals, he and his wife and how they communicate while she's playing one video game and he's playing another. I think a lot of people are going to say, gosh, it's like they're inside my own home right now. And even if you do not like the nerdy things in life, or you've never given them a chance, this is a great episode to kind of get it to peek behind the curtain a little bit. To see how the wizard actually works in Oz. So I think you should just sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World with our special guest, Patrick Kirby.
JJ Meets World.
Hey, Patrick, thanks for being back on the podcast. Last time we had you on, we talked a lot about the great work that you're doing with nonprofits and just kind of getting people to think differently about the way that they engage with their potential donors. And I love that episode, but we barely got to scratch the surface on the nerddom that is your daily life.
If you thought that it was, talking about fundraising is nerdy, that's not even close to the dorkness that is me. And that's the fun part. I have so many dorky stories to tell you now. Like, I've collected them on purpose just in case I was invited back to the show. And I feel like I'm very excited about that.
The first moment I knew that you were not the typical person who gives me a friend request is I think like the third post I saw about yours on Facebook was, my wife fell asleep on the couch. Time for me to open up Red Dead Redemption. And I remember thinking like, oh, I like this guy a lot. We got a lot in common.
Would that, do you think, like, intrude on her dreams then? She's like, Patrick, I had this dream that you were an outlaw in the Old West and you were just attacking people on the road and skinning rabbits.
Yeah, and she's never asked me to cosplay with her, which I'm kind of offended by. We're young. We've only been married, 11 years, so we're coming up on. We've got lots of time for that. Now, ironically, she has taken to Animal Crossing, and now when we were all sort of quarantined at home, she got a little stir crazy and wanted to download Animal Crossing for the kids. And I'm like, wow, what a great thing! That's kind of like mini. Sort of beginner's RPG, sort of kind of thing that you have to do. And she has now taken over and demands at all times, what are the kids doing? What are they buying? Where are they gathering? And then she will sit on the couch and play that next to me playing League of Legends. And that's how we spend our nights now. And it's glorious couple nerddom. And I'm so happy about that.
I mean, really, it could be saving your marriage, because I have a feeling at the end of this whole pandemic, people are really going to know if they can cut it with their spouse.
Isn't that the truth? My goodness gracious. And it's so much time together. And again, I appreciate it. And I love everything about being with family. I now know way too much. I know bathroom schedules. I know that now more than I ever cared to. You get reports at daycare, right? Like, hey, Willow took a poop. And I was like, oh, that's nice. I now exactly know when my kids have their potential, potty breaks and spousal breaks. This is now a thing. I did not know as intimately as I do now.
I talked to someone who said they want their kids to have the full school experience while they are learning from home. So they have to raise their hand and ask if they can go to the bathroom, and there's no dawdling on the way to the bathroom. And I thought, well, are you also serving hot dog buns with melted cheese on them and calling them Italian dunkers for lunch?
JJ has coined a new term on this podcast for when couples are together and maybe need to have a little separation. I believe it's separate couch night. Is that what it is?
Yep, separate couch night.
Yes. That is a thing, though. Shannon will go. My wife will go to the bedroom and shut the door, and then I will get the couch. And then sometimes she'll just stare at me like, "You're gonna sit on the couch again?" And it's like whoever can get there first almost claims the living room couch and not the bedroom area for the separation time. And surprisingly, we have not watched a billion shows together, which is really interesting. Like we got through Tiger King, and I dragged her through it. So I think by episode 3, she was like, I don't think I'm done with this. I'm like, well, we started. We have to watch. This is a couples thing now, and we have to. And I'm surprised that we haven't not gotten through so many things, because it's a toss-up. Do I play League of Legends and does she play Animal Crossing, or can we squeeze in 3 episodes of Schitt's Creek? And like that's now becomes the dynamic of our house when the kids go to bed.
Isn't that just bizarre? First of all, I don't think that you are alone. I think that there are billions of people across a planet who are trying to gauge their time in a similar way. Just last night, we fell into an old habit that we have in my household, which is I'd like to play a video game, which means that I'm going to be taking the big screen TV, but Jill doesn't want to be in a different room. So she grabs an iPad and will watch something on the couch while I'm sitting in what I call my gaming chair, which just means it's close enough so that I can read the small type that's in some video games on the big screen.
Yep.
And I have a feeling for the next couple of weeks, that's going to be our normal. So if there's a fire, it'll be up to me to alert Jill because she won't hear the alarm.
No, that's super true. And is also true that, I mean, you put out the N64. Is that what you posted?
Oh God, it was great.
That made me super jealous because I have 3 N64 games, but no N64 in which to play them.
Oh, yeah. I got really jealous. And then I realized in a box downstairs, I have every gaming system that I've been collecting since I was 10. And then I realized that my kids have not abundantly seen this horrifyingly amazing collection of games that I've collected over, 30 years. And now that's going to be a thing where we're going to hook them up to TVs and play. And I feel like they've gotten out of hand with the graphics nowadays that I don't think they're going to appreciate how amazing a side-scrolling game is and how frustrating those were in comparison to how easy it is to play video games now. Have you noticed that too? Like,
oh
it's
yeah,
impossible.
There's a term for it. There's actually a term for it. It's called Nintendo Hard, because games were a completely different level of difficulty. You've got games now that effectively play themselves for you.
Yep.
But you put them in front of the first Ninja Turtles game for original Nintendo and watch them smash those controllers in the underwater level. They will break them over their tiny little knees.
It's so true, and that's that. You know, you should do. This should be the entire episode of like the top 10 hardest games to play on original Nintendo, and that should be a thing. Because
and it's just us getting angry.
It's infuriating. You can't get past level 1, and then just a bunch of curse words, and that's the end of the podcast. And you haven't gotten through one game yet.
I actually remember as a kid, before I even had a Nintendo, I had an older cousin who had a Nintendo, and I remember playing with him on the Nintendo, and he would get so upset at anything that he would throw his controller against the wall. And to me, that was like, oh, this is how you play video games. I thought that was just a part of it. So when I finally got a Nintendo, I did that, and my parents were like, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing? Don't do that. You're going to break it." So I had to actually unlearn that behavior, because I thought, this is what playing video games is. You play the game, and when you lose, you get so upset that you throw the controller against the wall.
Yes, and that makes total sense to me, I think. Here's the other thing that's really weird now is, so if you get the Switch, you can get a list of classic NES and SNES games. So you can download this little package that has access to like Ninja Gaiden and Zelda and Zelda 2 and Mario Brothers 3. Like, you can get all these kind of cool games, and then games you've never played before, like Dodgeball, and just these terrible games that I think they just have in their archives. They're like, well, this doesn't seem to be a licensing fee. Let's put this up on this streaming system. But now they've got like a special version of each one of these games that gives you all the items out of the gate.
What?
And then so you can start Zelda with blue ring, a master sword, blue candle, the rock.
You got to earn it. You got to earn it.
You can go right into it with 255 ruples or rubies or whatever the heck they are, and then you can start with 8 bombs and a bunch of arrows, and you don't have to get anything of all the specialty items, and then you can just go through all of the dungeon levels with full awesomeness that you'd have to collect for hours. And that's cheating too. And yet I find myself drawn to it because I could burn through like all 7 levels really quickly and feel very accomplished about myself.
So here's the thing I noted. So I hooked up my N64 last night, but I don't have on the back of my very new TV the traditional red, white, and yellow inputs. I've got a series of them, and I actually had to go and download a PDF of the owner's manual for the TV to tell me which of these slots I should put this in. So I hooked it up, and it didn't want to recognize the input right away. When it finally did, there's a big problem, and Tucker was the first person to ever tell me about this, but the way TVs work nowadays, they don't handle that signal in the same way. So there is a slight lag.
There is
to what's going on. So the first thing I did is I put it into 4:3 for an aspect ratio, so it looked more boxy, like like the Magnavox I played on in my youth. And then the first thing I played last night was Mario Golf for the N64, one of my favorites.
So classic. Oh, so good. So I still, when I play golf, I will make Mario sounds from Mario Golf to those that I play with.
I was thinking that I used to do the same thing when I go play the par 3 at the country club. When I'd get a par, I do what the character Harry does, which is cross my arms and go,
Whenever you guys play like Super Mario Kart, do you lean into the turns as you're trying to
doubt?
Absolutely. You're not a player. I will do that in the golf cart. I'll go, okay, every time I hit the ball, and oh god, that's so funny. I'm so glad that there's someone else that does that, because my father-in-law used. So when we moved up here originally, we moved into my in-laws' basement while we tried to sell our house down in the Twin Cities, and that was in the middle of like the Great Recession. So we would sit down there and just stay up at his little makeshift bar in the basement and play Nintendo like 64 games just because there was nothing else to do. They live in the middle of the country, like the middle of the lake country. And in the middle of wintertime, you just don't do anything. And my wife was pregnant, would go to sleep all the time. So we would just play, and I obsessively play Mario Golf on the N64. And that's where it started. So the only two people now I know in this world who would get those jokes and sounds of the golf course is now my father-in-law and you.
It's amazing how. So I dedicated so much time in my youth to playing some of these games that like all of my I figured out this trick came back to me. So like when I'm playing the Toad Cup in Mario Kart, I know I'm like, oh, that's right. There's a secret that I can do when I go here, or I lean into this turn, or I want to save my mushroom for this straightaway. All of that knowledge is still stuck in my brain. I just have to put one of the controllers in my hand to unlock it. Yes. It's just amazing.
Oh, I love that so much. I'm going to set up Guitar Hero. That's another one. Guitar Hero back in like the early 20s or mid 20s. That used to be like the greatest thing in the world. That also doesn't work with new TVs and the lag within the systems anymore. And if you're off like a millisecond, because all these super high power TVs, I used to play that religiously, like more than a normal human should, to the point where I could play blindfolded. And I remembered patterns to play Guitar Hero. And I would do Guitar Hero contests in bars. Did you ever have that up here?
We did.
I would sit in there, and it was like Wild West gunslingers, where they'd be sitting around the bar sipping, not drinking totally, because you wanted your skills at just upper level for those gift certificates or gift cards you're going to win. And it would just be a bunch of people, and you'd know who would follow bars, who would be in Guitar Hero contests, and you'd see the same kind of people there. And it would be, I remember that like, oh God, I'm now having flashbacks to that. But then when you put it up to these really high speed TVs, it does not work the way it like this lag, this really quick, small little thing. And those nuances, man, if you're playing Dragon Force on that expert level, and good luck trying to con yourself into making good choices there. Oh,
I'm surprised that like if I was Samsung or Sony or any television maker, I would create what I would call a video game mold, or like retro mode that you could download, and then you just put your television into that mode. And when you hook up something like a Super Nintendo or even the PlayStation 2, it would try and mimic that. So it would figure itself out in a way.
That's brilliant.
I would love that. I can tell you this much: if they sold that, I'd be like, okay, sorry, LG, you're getting retired. I'm picking something else up. Okay, so when we were it sounds like the same age when Guitar Hero exploded. I worked at a video rental store at the time, which is maybe one of the greatest nerd jobs out there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Right before like comic book shop.
Right, yeah. Exactly. I mean, that's the antithesis. Like this one just allows you to like talk to the people you knew from high school a little bit easier, because they were coming in to rent the American Pie movies.
And they're like, "Can you hook me up with something here, man? Can you hook me up with free rental, maybe?
Oh, can you get rid of those late fees?"
Oh,
yeah.
So good.
I didn't even like the Green Mile. But so Guitar Hero came out when I'm working at this video store, and we couldn't keep it on the shelf. We were sending people to Best Buy every time we heard they got a shipment so they could pick up a couple extra versions. And one of my favorite things about the original Guitar Hero is if you watch someone playing that original Guitar Hero, they know by the sound of like the clack. Like, the clack, 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 clack that the middle strum would make.
Yep.
And so they would know without even watching the screen if someone was scoring on the right stuff, because they'd be like, nope. See how there's too much lag between that third and fourth one? And it just amazes me that people have this knowledge of Guitar Hero. I'm actually surprised that it is not as popular today as it was.
Well, you know what?
20 years ago.
Just a quick thought I had about video rental stores too. You wouldn't understand this, I think, if you didn't work at a video store. But that was like a position of power because you saw what people were renting. It was like having access to their browser history. So like you would be, you might be at school that day and you get in trouble with the principal, but then later he comes in and you look at his rental history and you're like, oh, European co-ed vacation, huh? Is that what you're still owing us late fees on? So that's like a position of, it was like you could really just look at someone's viewing habits and tell a lot about them if you were working at a video rental shop.
Did you have the family-friendly video shop, or did you work at a shop that was family-friendly, but behind the Old West saloon white flapping doors that would open up to the...
JJ and I worked in video rental shops in an era where it was nearly impossible to turn a profit without that section.
Yes.
Yep.
Like, you needed to have it. The first video shop I worked at was essentially, that was the only money that we brought in was behind. It was a shower curtain that he had up, and he had a poster of "Stop or my mom will shoot" right in front of it. That had like a line about how mom's going to shoot you if you're underage when you walk back there. And then the second one I had saloon doors in the far back. Yep. And 90% of the rentals we did was adult content.
I remember as like a 14-year-old kid, 14, 15, renting video games at like a Mr. Movies or whatever. And they would have the swing doors, and they would have video games in the back near, like not really next to, but near enough to the swing doors that I would go and like you could peer through like the gap in the middle just to maybe catch a glimpse of like what was on the shelf. And I was like, wow. And then you just like glance over at who would be going in there. And oh man, that was life back then. Holy buckets. That's great.
There were 3 types of people who rented adult content at Take Two Video where I worked. The first grouping of people was I'm doing it for fun. So yeah. I'm like the bachelorette party, or you were the one who is, like you and your buddies are going to do it because you're 18 now. And you could tell that person because there's a lot of giggling involved with them. The second was the coy shopper who would for some reason be like, oh, there's a new Christina Ricci movie, and they pretend to look at it until there's nobody in the vicinity, and then they kind of like sidle in there, and that person knows specifically what they're going for. They've probably been in that room a dozen times, and they are renting the same content over and over, so they are in and out of there before the flaps even stop like moving.
Yeah, and they're dressed up like a pop star avoiding the paparazzi. Yep. Like they've got sunglasses on, they've got a baseball cap where the brim is just a little too low, and they do a scan of the room where you see the look to the left, look to the right, one more time, and then whoosh, they're in and they are out. They don't browse. They know where they're going.
The third type is the one that I used to have the biggest trouble with of all, and that was I don't care what anyone else thinks. This person showed up on Thursday morning when we opened because new titles for that section came out on Thursday, and they were like, don't even bother putting them on the shelf. Just let me look through what's new first. And then when they went back there, they strutted back there almost with this, like their Little John from Robin Hood walking through the forest. They push both ends of the doors open, and they will yell questions over the partition and say like, hey, could you check the return bin to see if this is back in yet?
When I worked, the first video shop I worked at was Videoland, which is a classic video shop in Fargo. And I started working there just at sort of the beginning of the end of rental. Like rental still hung around for a bit, but Videoland was already kind of on its last leg. So we pretty much only had sales with adult work. And there was a lady who was a repeat customer, and she was very nice. She was probably, I'd say, maybe mid 60s. Loved porn. And she loved it so much that she actually had one of those yellow legal pads where she had written a list of everything that we had, and she was crossing off the stuff she had seen. And literally what she would do, and I had confirmation of this because my coworker at the time, Steve Hansen, rest in peace, Steve Hansen, he said, I've got a guy who works over at the Osco Drug. And what this lady does is she takes these videos home, watches them until she finds a moment she would like to preserve forever, pauses the video, and then takes a disposable camera and snaps a photo of the TV screen and then gets the camera developed over it at Osco Drug. And I loved this lady. I was like, that's awesome. She's living her truth. She knows exactly what she's doing.
Oh, that's so great. Or I would imagine there'd be a lot of people in and out and then trying to slip it in between like, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or Dumbo. and going up to the counter like, oh, I mean, I guess since it's here, I might as well just rent it.
And like, I just, I love the fact that at one point we had the amazing VHS tape world. So when I worked at Take-Two, we had already pretty much transitioned to all DVDs. There was almost zero VHS content in the entire store. But back in the day when it was all VHSs, those return bins must have weighed hundreds of pounds because the videotape. Also, did you ever go to the video store where they put the melted VHS tape on the counter to warn you almost almost
it's like Khaleesi putting the slave traders up on the blocks outside the city like as a warning.
Right? I'm thinking like it's the old West where, if you stole from a store or you're a cattle rustler, like they let you hang for a while so that newcomers to the town would be warned. But instead it's, don't leave this in your car. It's going to melt. It's going to melt. Okay. So Patrick, let's start talking about some nerddom stuff. I can't wait to hear some of the stories you've got prepped for us.
Well, so I'm new to Dungeons and Dragons, and I know that's a shocking thing because I'd never had a group of people who, like, I played Magic the Gathering in high school. Like, that's been a new thing. And by the way, getting out your old Magic the Gathering cards, and if you've got kids and trying to explain that, because everything is based on it. Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, like the original stuff is Magic the Gathering, right? So like I've got those, and the kids are just fascinated with those particular cards. But I have only recently, within the last like maybe year, 9 months, maybe about a year, gotten into Dungeons and Dragons, and it's a group of people that you exactly knew who were going to play Dungeons and Dragons, and then I'm so excited about it because I'm now rediscovering what I should have been doing when I was 12 and 13 years old, and it's joyful. So we've been playing for a couple of months, and the guy who DMs our game, our dungeon master, is good friends over at Paradox Comics locally. And so he comes to us about 2 weeks ago, and he says, "Hey, what would you think about, doing, now that we're doing this online, we're using Roll20 and using all these like sort of online systems to play D&D because it's our Monday night ritual, and that's what we got to do. And quarantine's going to hold us back from fighting off the evil orcs and going on quests. Dang it!" So he gets, I think it's, "Hey, would you like to do streaming on the Paradox Comics Twitch page?" And I'm now just getting into Twitch too because there's only so much you can do after you've watched all of Netflix. Now you just move on to people playing video games. I essentially think that that's the next step in quarantine life. And so we, for the first time, streamed our game on Paradox Comics Twitch page. And there's like 20 people watching, and now I'm wondering who is watching these, group of doofuses play Dungeons and Dragons on a Twitch page. And that's great. The rumor is, and I will confirm this, and I will probably send you a link probably immediately on Monday if this is true. The rumor is that the Twitch page that we will play on Monday night will be also co-streamed on the official Dungeons and Dragons Twitch account.
What?
Very cool.
And I'm sort of in this rut where like I'm so awesomely freaked out about it, and like I feel now I have to bring like a superior A game to the dozens of people who will tune into this. And how do you handle being in front? Like again, JJ, you've spoken in front of people forever, right? So you're doing performances. this is a performance that I am now officially nervous about, because you're entering a realm that I feel like I'm not qualified for, because I haven't been playing long enough to understand and still ask questions about, well, I'm sorry, what dexterity throw? Like, I'm kind of in that mode, still asking a whole bunch of questions. And I'm now having mild anxiety about the fact that other people across the world will now be completely like focused in on like my rules of engagement and what my bad choices will be. And I don't know how to get over it. Like this is now a thing that I have to worry about all weekend.
Well, and you know that with something like Dungeons and Dragons, the people who are into it enough that they are watching it on the Twitch official D&D stream.
Yes.
They know versions 1 through 5 completely. And so they, first of all, they're going to be judging you based on what edition? 3.5? Okay. Okay, simpleton. And then they're also going to throw stuff out there. I've gamed now with people who are considered power gamers, meaning they know how to exploit every single piece of magic, movement, anything like that. And it kind of takes the fun away of the game because they're so methodical about it.
Gotcha. Yes.
But I've also played with newbies who have to have things explained over and over and over again. And to me, it comes down to the DM. So if you've got a great DM, and it sounds like you do, I think you have nothing to worry about, because they're the ones who will double back on like, oh, did you add your strength to that? And be like, oh, no, I didn't. Great. Fantastic. You got a hit. Now my curiosity here is, do you guys have any rules as far as no cell phone use while you are playing, or you're not able to do anything that could be distracting?
Yes. So we're all on video in this, so you can tell who's paying attention and who's not. But we also have a lax rule at the table that we can move in and out of character to discuss things that are hilarious based on whatever happened in the game that pertain to pop culture or any reference in real life. So this will be the interesting thing about how hardcore gamers will be if we spend 2 hours gaming, but maybe 35 minutes of it is like fourth wall breaking reality conversation that goes along with it. Like that's I don't know how that's going to play, because that's kind of how it's our socialization for the week. As far, we get out of the house, we don't have to talk about, whatever, or like nerd, like I've got some guy who works at Microsoft who's on there, and another guy who's a video game programmer. And so we'll dive into that during the game. So how, because you've played along, like, is that an acceptable route, or do we have to go on our best behavior? And then what's best behavior? Is this PG-13? Because we've got a wild rogue who is a cat person who drops F-bombs all the time. We got to censor her because she's, but that's part of her character. So now what do we like that? See, these are all the things that I'm now confused about. And I don't have a voice, and my character is it's like a sarcastic alcoholic warrior. And so I feel like I've based a character that I was typecasted in high school theater, where I was always the sarcastic alcoholic, non-singing, non-dancing lead. And it was purposeful. And at the end of high school, I turned to my theater teacher and I go, I realized that I wasn't the greatest singer and dancer, but these are typecast. And he just nodded. He goes, yep. I've taken
a little bit of life imitating art sort of going on.
So I've just taken that character and just run with it in life. And then that became my D&D character as well. So I will sarcastically address things in what I assume is a state of like a 0.12 alcohol blood content, right? So that's kind of how I'll play. And then that will be the drinking that I will be doing during the game, stacking beer cans in the video, right? I don't know how so these are the questions I had to bring to the table today, because I'm not sure how to play this. And as you can see, I'm overly concerned. I'm overly concerned about the play on Monday.
And, you know, I'm going to tell you something right off the bat from both a consumer of this and somebody, I mean, I've now played D&D for almost a decade. People want to see more than just what you're choosing to do with your rules. They want to hear that kind of funny side comment. Here's my suggestion. Here are some of the most popular D&D pieces of pop culture that have gone outside of the realm of people who just regularly play D&D. Number one, you can watch, I think, the bulk of this season 1, at least for free, Harmon Quest.
Oh.
It's a D&D game, that Dan Harmon plays, and that is a perfect example of what this should be like. It should be conversational, and it should be, you know, people having fun. In improv, we have a saying from Susan Messing, who's just kind of like the godmother of improv, which is, if you're not having fun, you're an asshole. And really, I mean,
take a drink on that one.
Right. I mean, it's a great way of just thinking about, like, you know, if you're not having fun while you're doing it, what's the point?
Yes.
So there's that. Secondly, one of the biggest pieces of like nerd culture I've consumed over the last couple of years is I love the show Community that was on NBC.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a perfect 21st century television program that's aimed at, you know, just anything. They do great parodies of different things and episodes. There's one where they brought Dick Wolf in and they shot the whole episode as if it was an episode of SVU, and it is amazing. They brought David Lynch in and they made a David Lynch episode, and it all takes place in this community college. Anyway, they've got an episode that's Dungeons and Dragons based where they don't leave a table. It's all shot with them at this table in a study room while they play Dungeons and Dragons. But by simply adding small sound effects and their reaction to what's going on, it feels like the most epic. It feels like an episode of Game of Thrones, but there's no costumes. There's nothing. It is just these 6 people sitting around the table. And so I always tell people, you know, if you really want to see what D&D can feel like, that is a great episode, and it's called, I think, it's Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, I think, is the name of the episode. There's great.
There's this really interesting intersection between role-playing games and radio dramas or podcasting and book reading, which is, it all involves theater of the mind.
Yeah.
And I think we all get so, I mean, I'm a cinema lover. I love film. I love television. And so those are mediums that are awesome, but they're also incredibly literal. Usually they're showing you exactly what you're supposed to be seeing. You're hearing exactly what you're supposed to be hearing. And in these other setups, it's pretty sweet where you don't, you get to have your mind kind of take over.
So Patrick, let me ask you this. When it comes to your nerdy nature, it sounds like your wife doesn't judge you too harshly for this, which has got to be good because you want to find a partner who can accept you at your nerdiest. Am I right?
That is super correct. And at least she doesn't do it outwardly to either friends or my face. There's a bit of me, I think, that the side-eye judgment of like, oh boy, this again. I feel like that's probably a thing. But no, embracing just the general nerdiness, I think, is super important and delightful. And again, I've got the kids who are sort of entering into this stage as well. So we started reading The Hobbit together. So I have an 8-year-old and an almost 6-year-old and a 3-year-old girl, but she doesn't get involved. So at night, we have story time. So every night I read to my kids, and we started picking up The Hobbit and started from scratch, the non-picture book, like straight up novel, The Hobbit. And like you were talking about with theater of the mind and just sort of listening to, you know, things and not having them sort of force fed to you with like, this is what you're supposed to like think about. They ask so many interesting questions. Hey, Dad, can you read about that troll part again? And you can like see their brains working, and then they want to talk about orcs, and then they want to write about orcs, and then now I think my wife is like, okay, this is now genetic, clearly. We passed on a trait that they can't escape from, and it's wonderful. And that's how I'm literally being at home teaching my kids during the day and kind of splitting the days with my wife working. We do independent like writing and sort of creative writing stuff, and they're super into fantasy and like swords and magic and stuff. And so we wrote our own choose your own adventure book, which is like that. Remember, like those are the super dorky versions of that's how I got into this when I was a kid. And so they created their own characters and they created their own paths and their own options. And a lot of them have to do with dragons and swords and wizards. And it makes me super happy as a human.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't you, right? That sounds like the absolute dream. One of my biggest fears is that my children are going to be super good at sports. And I'm going to have to figure out a way to fake it through every hockey practice and being like, yeah, I'm really excited to go out and shoot hoops with my son today.
I think one of the small joys I had was my middle child trying to throw a baseball, and it didn't work out as well as like you always have this dream, like, all right, he's going to be an athlete. And he just threw the ball, and I was like, that's not going to work. So video games it is. And there was a small part of me that was like, it's the same way as you, like nodding, like, oh, okay, I can watch esports. This is easy for me.
I specifically remember a moment from my childhood where we got home from something and we're all going in, and Dad picks up like a Nerf football. He goes, "Hey Tucker, do you want to throw the football back and forth for a little bit?" And I remember thinking, don't you know who I am? Haven't you known me since I was born? At what point have you ever known me to be someone who wants to throw a Nerf football? But on the outside, I just say, no, I'm good, Dad. And I remember the look of disappointment in his face, because I think now that I reflect on it, it was probably more of a, oh, my son doesn't want to hang out with me. But really it was, Dad, let's do something that I enjoy. And you know me, you know that that Gilbert Gottfried could throw a football better than I could probably throw a football. So let's find something else to do. That's the first time I remember letting my dad down with the fact that I had not only did I have zero athleticism, I had negative athleticism. It wasn't going to be good.
The fact that they have esports teams in college now, and the fact that you can get scholarships, full ride scholarships for playing video games to college, makes my heart sing. And
isn't it great?
Right. I'm super jealous about it, because I think, well, and not that I would be any good and I would be on the B squad wherever I go, but the fact that it happens is so amazing. It's awesome. And by the way, during pandemic times, watching esports competition is literally the thing that I love doing, because there are no sports otherwise to watch. And so now I find myself scrambling to watch. I'm like, wow, look at that move in a Tekken fight. Sweet.
So this is something that I think Patrick was going to bridge the previous JJ Meets World episode you were on and this one, which is, for the last couple of years, because nerd culture has become so popular, and the fact that it's really just become pop culture at this point, I have been working on, I do a lot of corporate speaking where I go in and use improv to help people with team building, things like that. Mm-hmm. But I have been working on an RPG based session where I could go in and help people improve efficiency in their office by essentially getting them to go through a Dungeons and Dragons mini campaign. So if you can imagine having to get together and they're like, well, they're going to bring Jimmy John's in for lunch, so I guess I'll sit through whatever this this symposium is. And we let everyone pick the character that best represents them in the office. And so instead of being a mage or a cleric, you would pick, what am I in the office? Well, I'm support staff, or I'm sales. And each of those individuals would get their stat sheet, and we'd have to go through, okay, so we're meeting with this client. If sales takes this client on their own, can they make the sale? AKA, can they slay the orc? But we find out that, actually, you need someone from accounting to bring in this specialty power from accounting to help you figure out how to work. I am so jazzed to make this thing work. And I know that there are companies who are going to look at it and be like, well, that was a really horrible 60 minutes. But then the company that says, could we continue doing this? Like, could we take another like break after lunch and finish the rest of this sale? I'm very excited for it.
My brain just exploded, and that is the best thing that I've ever heard. That is amazing. I've always wanted to do like a collection of people who have like talent around me. So like in a consulting role, like I can do one thing really well, and that's like fundraising consulting, and like that's my jam. So I need like experts in every little areas to like sort of bring in. And I had this like really bizarre idea of using like Magic the Gathering stat cards, where like a company could say, or a nonprofit could say, I need fundraising help, but I also need IT and marketing and writing. And then I would like show them a bunch of Magic the Gathering, like custom cards of people that I know with super skills. And then like they get to pick their own like team with those specific, like that is, I've had this dream for a long time, and now I get to share it with you, and now I get to live vicariously through you on these trainings, and that's the best thing ever. It's the best thing ever.
So I've always envisioned this world where I make 3 different types of business card. One is a standard business card when I can't really get a read on the other person of like, would this person appreciate, my nerdy self. And then the other one would be a nerd themed business card that would, maybe have some like neat references on it. Like I always thought like a Hyrulean shield would be a fun business crest to have. And then the last one would simply be a web address. And the website would kind of welcome you into the secret world of like, let's do it. Let's do some business together. But first, here's my favorite clip from Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. And really just get deep with it and find out where the biggest bunch of business comes from. Like, is it going to come from the people who I put my faith in to just, embrace the nerd with me? Or is it going to come from the people who just took the standard business card and they're like, yep, I put it in my Rolodex. That's how I found you and remembered you.
I feel like if you had a quiz on that website that would lead you to the conclusion whether you would enjoy working with that person based on their answers of what they appreciated in pop culture, science fiction, and fantasy, then you could tell right away, like, I don't know, what's Star Trek for? Like, I didn't know there were more than one Star Trek. Immediately, you wouldn't want to work with them. Or just use like video game references. You're like, okay, well, on however you want to go about doing it, that would then lead you to the conclusion whether they understand your humor at all and whether you'd be a good fit.
I think this is going to lead to some like anti-jock discrimination laws that we've never even thought of before. We're like, how can I get a job? I guess I know I haven't watched the original Star Wars cut, but come on.
I mean, you're not wrong.
No, you're right.
In fact, I feel like the next version of the movie Revenge of the Nerds is going to just be called like Revenge of the Jocks. Yes. And it's going to be the jocks, showing that like, hey, listen, we're good at homework too, everybody. So I mean, I guess we'll have to just wait and see.
What was that Simpsons episode where Homer goes to college and he thinks it's going to be like high school?
The jocks versus the nerds.
Yeah, and he spikes the punch, and then someone goes, "Someone, just everyone, someone has spiked the punch, but don't worry, I've called all of our mommies and daddies, and they're coming to take us home."
Yep. And Homer shows up in that one, and he sees a kid with glasses walking, and he rolls down the window and goes, "Nerd!" And Marge goes, "Homer, that's not very nice." He says, "Marge, there are 2 types of people at college, jocks and nerds. As a jock, it's my job to hassle the nerds." And then a guy in a Letterman jacket passes by, and he goes, "Hey, did you see that total nerd walking by?" And they write the perfect response. He goes, "What's that now?" and I just think, oh, Simpsons, you guys nailed it. You nailed it.
How many times have you used that? I've used that GIF of or GIF, however you want to pronounce it. I don't want to get into a fight about that, but that's a whole podcast. GIF. of Homer rolling down his window and using the word nerd. I've used that in casual conversations, and that becomes that's right in this like culture where we have to be online all the time. That's a fun thing to see who understands the references that you make in GIF or GIF form on responding via text message and or messenger. And I think that's another thing that you can like, hey, I don't understand that one. Nope, can't be friends. Or at least I need to explain to you what that is and why that's funny. Oh, so good.
I think nerd culture was the first group that really started memorizing and quoting things from movies and from comic books and other pieces of literature. You know, before that, maybe you had like a poetry teacher who had memorized a little bit of prose, but the nerd culture, especially during the 70s and 80s, was the one who, you know, they memorized every line from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. They could quote the whole, you know, damn it, somebody says, I didn't vote for you. And then the next 20 minutes go by with someone's doing all the parts over and over and over again.
That's kind of the era where we had the rise of the fan convention, too, was sort of in the late 70s, early 80s was where that really started to happen, where people who liked the same thing didn't have a tool like the internet to form communities. And so they had to go to like, you know, the Holiday Inn for like a weekend in a ballroom and meet some of their fellow people. But now, because, you know, any subgroup or subculture can form a community really, really quickly. And so now it's just sort of proliferated. So I think we're really lucky, too, in that at that time, it was really hard to find fellow fans of things. You and maybe two other friends might have to click up in high school. But now, you know, everyone can find everyone, which is great.
It was the one who was brave enough to bring up the topic of Magic the Gathering at a high school table full of kids to like whisper softly, hey, anyone here like Magic the Gathering? And then you didn't want to say it too loud because you didn't want to get into the, you know, oh, I want a nerd. Like, you don't want to do that. I remember the first time that I saw an actual, like a conference full of Star Trek, like people. And I was so enamored by it. There's a hotel by my house when I lived in the Twin Cities. And it had a huge, you know, massive ballroom. And that's apparently where they had the Star Trek convention every single year. And there was also attached to that a French restaurant that my mom and I really, really liked getting French onion soup. Bizarre. So we went on a mom-son date when I was like 13 years old or whatever. And we were sitting in the restaurant and we're having a nice little lunch together. And we leave through the area where you would enter into the ballroom. And there was a man in a banana suit sitting on a lounge chair near the indoor pool. And we stood there. We're like, what is, like, I don't understand any of this. And then everyone dressed up as Star Trek characters. And again, I don't know why the man in the banana suit was at the Star Trek convention. That doesn't reference to me. I don't know. But then the people who were like cosplaying Star Trek came in and were doing dialogue near the pool. And we couldn't look away. Like, we didn't understand any. I'm like, Mom, what is this? Why are we? Again, I can't look away from any of this. And then you walk down the hall and it was filled like comic books and people on stage and they're answering questions and there's characters. Like, it was the most amazing thing in the entire world. And I really do think that was like the moment where there are so many more people. This is pre-internet. Like, this is before anything online, that you could totally associate with people, or they existed in mass. And I had no idea how to connect with them. Like, that was the confusing part. And you're totally right. Then you went on AOL and you just went into chat rooms, or like Star Wars nerds chat room. Okay, I'm totally down for that. 15M, whatever. And that became the whole thing. Like, now we have this entire culture where we get to associate with folks who are as dorky and nerdy as us. And they're way more than you ever thought about. Way more.
I think that is just amazing for me to think of. The fact that even a town such as Fargo, which is not big by any means, but we have multiple groupings throughout the year of people who just want to be among similar deep dive folks. And then the fact that there's people who go to this who are only obsessed with one thing. right? So when I think of nerd culture, I think of people who know everything about so many different subjects, but really we have refined it down to the point of where if you know every single episode of Farscape, you can go to this thing not having any idea about the Millennium Falcon, not knowing why there's a new Mad Max movie coming out. All you know is Farscape, and you're celebrated for that knowledge. But at the same time, there are people who are like, I would really love to get you into my hotel suite and explain to you the inner workings of the Starship Enterprise for several hours.
Yes. And that is the best thing ever. Like I would love to talk about Final Fantasy VI for
hell
like
yeah
28 hours.
Yes,
right?
you just said my absolute favorite video game of all time.
Of all time, right?
It broke my heart though too. So when I played it, it was as Final Fantasy III in the Super Nintendo American version.
Mm-hmm.
I spent an entire summer playing that game, and I had every character. I had all like the hidden characters that are kind of harder to find, and I had leveled them all up to level 99.
Oh my god!
And the only character I didn't have still was Shadow, because I didn't wait on the floating island in the World of Balance for him to show up. But I had read online that if you go to the Colosseum and you do like the certain series of like trades or whatever, and you fight a certain amount of people, you'll fight Shadow again. You can get him back into your company. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to go get Shadow. I'm going to get him up to 99 and I'm going to beat the game. This was like 2 days before the end of summer. And I'm like, I'm going to finish that up. I'm going to beat the game. I'm going to go to school, having loved my entire summer. I go, I put the cartridge in, and it must not have been seated incorrectly, because when I turned the game on, it glitched. So I had to turn the game off, pull the cartridge out, put it back in, turn it back on, and all the saves were erased.
No.
And all of the work that I had put in, where you go to the Triangle Island that has the Brontosaur, and you've got the ribbon, so you're getting double XP, and you're only fighting with one character, so they get all the experience for themselves. I had done that entire thing for every goddamn character in that game. And then 2 days later, I was going to have to go to stupid school and start a new year. And I've never been able to go back. I've played the game a few times since then, but I've never put in the time to completely beat the game. So at some point, that's on my bucket list. But as far as nerding out over storyline, characters, graphics, music, that game is the most beautiful game ever created for the Super Nintendo, and I will fight anyone who disagrees with me. I mean, I will give you my address. Come here and we will break the social distancing protocol, and I will fight you if you disagree with me.
I will join your party in this fight. And that is the great thing. By the way, that story, I'm literally heartbroken. Like, that was the most heartbreaking thing I've ever had to listen to in a minute and 30 seconds, because that is horrifying.
I'm glad there's someone here who can share my pain, because I think that washed off JJ's back like water off a duck.
Oh, no. I full on understand exactly the pain. Now, I didn't have it with that. I had it with The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, where I spent an entire summer. And so I'm a completist when it comes to video games. So I have to get every heart. I have to get everything. You know, I'm not one of those, I can beat this thing in 6 hours, no sweat. Be like, nope, it is a long road for me. And I remember the day I finally beat A Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. And my cousin Andrew and I celebrated by just yelling and screaming because we did it. And then I had this hollowness wash over me because I had done it and it was over and there was no more. And again, this is back at a time where my biggest outlet to finding out if a new video game is coming out was Nintendo Power. And they weren't talking about the fact that in 3 short years I would be playing Ocarina of Time and losing myself in that on the N64. But it's just,
that was my
what a
dream
world.
job.
Do nerds have maybe the biggest hearts and the saddest lives when it comes to waiting for stuff than any other clique in the world? Because we're so patient and we wait, and sometimes we get a beautiful payoff and we get this superb just master of what we're looking at. I'm thinking about like the going from Link to the Past to Ocarina of Time. Oh my God, they're amazing. And then sometimes we get a slap in the face that feels like somebody just took all the air out of the room, because I go to the opening night of Kingdom or Crystal Skull with Indiana Jones, and you go like, did you not ask anybody about this before you made it?
The South Park episode that referenced Crystal Skull is, if you have not seen that as a thing, it will as nerd and as a dork and as just somebody who's followed the Indiana Jones series, it is the most accurate description of all your feelings in the entire world.
It's a very dark episode, but it's a correct one. But also, I mean, there's this sort of like, it's sort of like I don't know if catch-22 is the right phrase or not, but I think this is happening in the Blizzard world, in World of Warcraft and in Diablo, where a company gets to a certain size where they start to take their success for granted, and then they stop listening to the fan base. So in the past year or two, they had the re-release of Warcraft 3, which was a complete debacle. They absolutely completely had a tone deaf BlizzCon where everyone thought they were going to be announcing Diablo 4, and instead they announced basically a Diablo skin to a mobile game, and then made fun of the audience sitting there because they were all PC gamers who weren't there looking for a mobile game. And so it's sort of like, you as the fan go, I love this thing and I want to continue to support it, but at what point do I have the right to feel umbrage when I'm not being listened to? And I think it gets kind of tricky. But imagine all of the goodwill right now that Marvel Studios has. Even for me, I love Marvel Comics. I'm a Marvel comic kid. I have been since I was 5, and I love the Marvel movies. And they're on top of the world right now. But I could totally see at some point in the future, people taking that success for granted and our goodwill for granted. And then if they start turning out products that we don't like and we tell them that, oftentimes there's kind of a blame game thing that happens, right? Like, oh, you fans, you're just not loving us the way that you're supposed to be loving us. So there's like a weird back and forth that can kind of trip us up. And you have to almost adopt what is often referred to in Star Wars circles as headcanon, where you go, okay, I get what the official canon is of the storyline, but to me, the only Star Wars that is real is the original trilogy and The Mandalorian. In my head, that's what Star Wars is. In my headcanon, I just ignore that the other 6 things exist. And that sort of is different for different people. You almost have to kind of create those rules so you can continue to enjoy a thing.
Is that what's going to happen at Final Fantasy VII Remake? Is that why it's just not coming out in a timely fashion and they're just trying to get it right? Or is it just because they can't figure it? Like, what is that? Like, I think it's a
couple things. I think it's a couple of things. I think one, I think there's always scope creep when you've got a sufficient enough size budget and a studio and a fan base that's interested in it. And also they're only releasing it in from one part after another part. And so there's this whole paradigm now where it's software as a service instead of a product, where you're basically, not only will you pay, $60 for the right to even have the game on your system, but then they're going to nickel and dime you when you're in the game to try to get even more money out of you. So I think there are some bad incentives on the gaming side. Now, what is I forget the name of the company that does like Red Dead Redemption? Oh yeah, and are they the same group that does The Witcher?
No. Oh,
I think, but at least if it's the same studio or if it's different studios, those two studios seem to have a really good thing going where they actually release a completed project.
Yeah.
And if there are any things like microtransactions or things that happen after the fact, it makes sense because it's for, cosmetic things that you don't need to beat the game. It's not like a pay to win type game like a lot of mobile games are. So I think part of it is just there's bad incentives because they make so much money to make incomplete games. So you're continuing to get cash out of the people playing it versus us who grew up in the era of cartridges where, no, that's the game. You drop your 20 or 40 or $60 and you get the game and that's it. and you play it till you're done, and then you move on to the next game. It might be something like that.
When you played it to the end, like that, I always liked did you use the books that gave you all the details on how to win the games? Like when you played Final Fantasy X or you played like Zelda or whatever, you buy the power guide where you could then find it? Or were you I'm going to find everything myself because I'm awesome and I know how this game works?
It would typically be, for me, it would be a combination of the two. And I'm a massive Final Fantasy fan, although I haven't played 15 yet because I don't have a PS4. But typically what I would do is, because usually it's an open enough world, you would have the ability to go back to zones and try stuff if you needed to.
Right.
So I would try to absolutely cover every step of ground I could in a zone. And then when it was time to move on, I would look at the book and go, did I miss anything? Because you still, like, there's in Final Fantasy VI, there's ultimate weapons.
Right.
And actually that's in 7 as well. There's 7's got different types of materia. 7 had different characters that are listed in the book, but you could totally play through the game and actually never find them. So it was sort of a thing where I was in it for the story and the art, and sort of it was like I was playing a book almost versus like a Twitch-based game, like a racing game or something, which it really absolutely relies on your skill, versus this was more of a living in the world and experience the role-playing aspect of it. So I would try to do a combination of both, and then I'd go to the book if sometimes there are bosses that in those turn-based strategy games that you didn't realize you had to prepare a certain way for them, and now you're stuck in a loop where you just can't beat them because your characters aren't powerful enough, and you saved at a point where you can't go back. So sometimes you could get stuck in those loops, and you need the book to help you get out of it.
I will take what Tucker's saying and tell you what I did in my childhood, which is I just unboxed my Nintendo 64, and I wish I had a picture of this. I keep this down in like a storage area of my basement, but I went out and bought the same size plastic tubs and then a label maker. So this is all my SNES equipment, and then this is all my N64 equipment. And at the bottom of each of these are handwritten on construction paper notes. Not only did I not have the books because I couldn't afford to buy them when I was a kid, but I actually wrote my own personal notes on how to do this so that I could go back later on and be able to play through some of those things.
Brilliant.
And like I put down grids where I said, okay, so to be able to get this, you move this block in this direction. And my favorite one is for Mega Man X, was my favorite Mega Man game. And I've got all of these codes. It's like a 25 block code base where you have to do 1 3 9 9 4 1 7, and I have got probably 400 of those written down with variations of where I am at that time, because it includes like how much you've got built up in your extra tanks, who you've defeated at this point, where you are as far as health in certain points. And so I've got this giant which is really at this point moot because I've got the friggin' internet now, but I can't bear to throw them away because they were my personal little guides from back in the day, and I love them.
I think one of my favorite internet memes that I've seen in a long time is like a guy, I think it was like playing Kingdom Hearts or something, and it said like, guy who hasn't played RPG in a week might as well just start over. Like, it's the most relatable thing ever, because you just forget about it for a week and a half and you're like, where in the hell was I? Like, what adventure am I on?
Trying to get back into Red Dead Redemption, if you haven't played it in a while, you might as well just start over at the beginning.
Yep.
Because you forget like, oh yeah, that's this place, or I need that, or wait a minute, where do you find the the plains creeper when it comes to this thing? So I totally understand where people are coming from when they want to do stuff like that. And do you remember like back in the day, you would get the small little manual for the game.
Yes.
And it would have note pages in the back so you could make your own notes while you're playing games.
I actually have a story about that too. So my first gaming system I had was a Nintendo, 8-bit Nintendo that my parents picked up at a garage sale. So it came with like the bundled Super Mario Duck Hunt double cartridge. And I loved the game, but what I loved even more was the instruction booklet, because it had a page for each of the different bad guys.
Yes.
And first grade, I sat down and I completely recreated the section that talked about all the bad guys, where I drew each picture and wrote out the words exactly as it was. And I stapled it together like a book. And then I brought it to Mrs. Honnell's first grade class. And God bless her heart, my first grade teacher read it to the class for story time. And I was so proud because I had completely plagiarized the section of the Super Mario Brothers booklet and got it read to the class at story time. I had totally forgotten about that memory. I did a similar thing with Mario 3 because I was obsessed with the Koopa Kids. So I drew them all out and copied that, but I was not able to get Mr. Wild, my third grade teacher, to read it to the class.
I found, and I don't know where this ended up in my collection, but I found a Dragon Warrior, original NES Dragon Warrior, in the box with the booklet, and like it wasn't open. And I don't know where this came from. Like, I don't know if I bought it from somebody like when I was a teenager or whatever, but it was in the bottom of my very own JJ Crystal Clear box of gaming systems. And the perfect, like, have you seen what those sell for on the internet? Like, those don't exist anymore. And I stare at it every once in a while with like my baseball card collection, and I just sit there like, oh man, this is going to be retirement. I don't care what my 401k looks like. I got this.
I love that kind of stuff. Okay, Patrick, as we get to wrap this thing up, because there are so many people listening to this podcast right now who are itching to go pull out their D20 dice. They're going to get their classic gaming system out. Maybe they're going to pop in their favorite Monty Python movie. So if you could go back and talk to yourself, if you could go back and talk to, let's say, 14-year-old Patrick Kirby, what would you A, tell him to save, and B, tell him to what advice would you give to him as you go forward?
Oh, that's like the greatest. That's the greatest question. Here's the thing. I love the fact that I don't think I saved enough so that I can have conversations like this with individuals like you about the process of either losing or remembering or talking about what used to be like the pinnacle of your awesome nerdness back in the day. And I think if I had kept everything and I wasn't like, I didn't lose something, or I didn't trade a game, or it went away, or I didn't envelop myself around like Final Fantasy VI, and then just again swear, just like Tucker says, that this is the greatest thing and you have to fight me for it kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think because I didn't save it and because I didn't obsess over it then, I think the joy that I find in talking about this kind of stuff and like sort of throwing memories back, that even in like the worst sort of global crisis ever, I'm literally, for the rest of the day, I'm going to have like this beaming sort of joyful grin on my face because I got to experience like an hour worth of, man, remember that? And it was so fun to do this that I get to do that with my kids and my, and grandkids, God willing, and like friends on the internet. And I don't think I would change much except for the fact that I should have just gotten whole packs of cards when they were like 40 cents a piece and just put them in a Dropbox somewhere in a bank. Other than that, I think just experiencing it and then doing it, and then now finding all the friends who also have those same memories and realizing that no matter what the background is or whatever their jobs are, this is the thing that makes us like
just joyful. I think it's so fun. Like, isn't it? This is so fun to talk about. On and we don't do it enough, because I think, either we haven't found our friends enough to do it or have a space to chat about it. But I just the whole thing. I'm like, hey, I'm serious. I'm gonna go play Final Fantasy VI now, and I'm gonna go play it from start to finish now. And my kids are old enough that they can kind of understand it, and that's just the thing I'm gonna do. And this conversation has become like a catalyst for it. Like, that's so cool to me. So cool.
I think that is exactly the way you should sum it up too, because sure, we all wish that we had held on to that one comic book or maybe that one baseball card that now is worth a lot. But the memories and the nostalgia you feel for those times is almost more important than anything else. Like, I remember the night that I beat every single person at a sleepover every single time we played original Mario Kart. I can see myself in my basement. I know that we ordered Domino's pizza and we got the Parmesan bread twists at the time. I can taste the surge in my mouth. And I remember at the end of the night being like, well, it doesn't get any better than this. I won every single Mario Kart I engaged with tonight. I should just retire and go out on top. And so I love that idea.
It is. It's exactly right. Like, I remember being at Chris Peterson's house, and we snuck in Surge, and my friend Brian Bardish convinced his mom that I think a sleepover was a good idea. And we stayed up until like 3 a.m. playing Zelda, and we would take turns on different levels and just eat chips. And like that, I still remember that. I'm like 10, 11 years old, 12 years old. Then that's what I'll always remember, that kind of stuff. That's so, absolutely.
If you want something super fun, one of my favorite things going on Instagram right now is people are recreating the opening screen, like the pick your character screen of Mortal Kombat.
Yes.
But it's as your quarantine character. And they're doing kind of that like shifting weight from like left foot to right foot. So they're kind of moving, but they're doing it so that it's instant cuts. And then in one, you're in a bathrobe. And then in the next one, you're carrying Kleenex and you've got a mouth or like a face mask on. And in the next one, you are just in sweatpants. And it has become one of my favorite things. And that shows me that video game, that nerd culture is here to stay, that people are recreating this for fun. And, I think a lot of times we think, okay, so picture the quintessential nerd in your head. And they're like, okay, so they look either malnourished or like they just got done at an all you can eat buffet, bad skin, glasses, probably wearing a shirt that either has, the Starfleet symbol on it or some weird, callback to Dungeons and Dragons. And they are keeping to themselves at whatever social event they're at. And what I love is that might be the stereotype, but that no longer is what a nerd looks like anymore. In fact, the mayor of Fargo was on a radio show I hosted years ago when he was actually running for mayor. And we had both candidates go back and forth in a trivia contest. And one of the questions we asked was about Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome. And he nailed it. And he told us about how big of a fan he was of the Mad Max movies and how he couldn't wait for Fury Road to come out. And I was like, well, you're my mayor. You're my mayor from now on.
I think you replay that back and you just say that this is the turning point, Mayor, where I think you won, and you're welcome for me asking that question. And I think you can make a great case for that, straight up.
Yeah, I think it'd be like, this is where you humanized yourself to the rest of the world.
That's genius.
You're welcome. Patrick Kirby, thank you so much for coming on. Okay, so let's get this out there too. You've got a pretty exciting event coming up in the very near future, and you actually have done what everybody else did not do. You actually took an event planned for July, and you moved it up to April.
I did. It was a tough decision because I had 4 months to plan. And then I only had 4 weeks to plan. And I thought to myself, I don't think it's a nonprofit conference. It's helping fundraising and sort of tactical tips and tricks and mental wellness and all things that nonprofits need. And I usually do it in July. I moved it up to April 29th. And the purpose of this was not we were not going to make a boatload of money out of it, but I thought that this is going to be a great statement to say we're going to help as many people as possible. So it bumped it up, reduced the price, opened it up globally to anybody who wants to join. We got speakers that we would never have been able to get because of the situation kind of we're in. And then in addition to it, we're going to feature local artists and musicians in between speakers, which we've, pared down to like 25-minute little, sort of a little longer than TED Talks kind of stuff about topics of fundraising and auditing, like all the things that you need to do with a nonprofit. And it's just going to be amazing. And we did it for nonprofits. We need to help them as much as anybody else right now. And I am just so nervous about folks who are just sitting on their hands and not doing anything at nonprofit groups because they don't know what to do. And so I just tried to lay everything, all the cards on the table. We're throwing all the spaghetti at the wall, every sort of term you want to coin, to make sure that nonprofits survive and thrive coming out of this global pandemic. And we're bumping it up. So it's the Do-Gooders Conference. It's April 29th. It's all virtual. There's going to be live bands in between speakers. And we're arranging lunches to be delivered for our Lady Bosses of the Nonprofit World keynote luncheon presentation from local restaurants. So we've partnered up locally here with Chef's Kitchen or Chef's Table and the Boiler Room and Luna. And we're going to arrange regionally here or locally here lunches to be delivered to you if you buy a ticket. And I didn't change that on the website. And so now I've got people in like Texas and California and Florida and all over buying tickets. And now I'm sort of in the logistical nightmare of trying to figure out how I can deliver local lunches there too, because I said it out loud and it's on the internet. But it's such a fun chaos to work in to help those who have been helping the community forever. And I'm so pumped about it. I'm so excited about it. And I'm terrified at the same time. And I really do think that it just takes all of us to help the nonprofit world that has been helping us forever. And it's the least that we can do. And supporting local musicians and businesses is right up there as well.
That is some very, very cool stuff. Hey, thanks so much for inspiring me. It's so great when I see people out there doing something and I go, oh my gosh, I want to be like him when I grow up.
Well, I appreciate the time too. And again, I love talking about nonprofit stuff all the time. I love talking about nerdy stuff the way that we just spent an hour and a half today, just kind of just shooting the breeze about this thing. This is such a mental health break that I needed. And so I appreciate you and Tucker just kind of inviting me on the show because it's so fun to talk about. Memory Lane is going to be the entire weekend. For the rest of the weekend, I'm going to think about this and talk about this with my kids, and it's great. And you guys,
I hope you enjoy your Final Fantasy VI, my good man.
I'm going to.
A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews, and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. There was also a 4th person who would go into the adult section of Take Two Video, and that person was the other employees who work there who would make a fake name. And so when you called them because of something hadn't been returned on time, you'd be like, Eric, what are you? Oh, awkward.